everyone. My name is Dr. Dave Anderson, and I'm a clinical psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. I'm also our Senior Director of National Programs and Outreach, meaning that I oversee programs in schools and community settings in New York, Baltimore, and San Francisco uh, over the course of the school year in over 150 schools a year. Uh, the Child Mind Institute is a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. You can learn more about the resources that we have available for families during the coronavirus crisis, including telehealth evaluations, telehealth consultations, telehealth treatment, by visiting childmind.org/coronavirus. There are also articles on there about talking to your children about COVID, as well as special considerations for children who might have special needs or particular mental health and learning disorder diagnoses. Today, I'd like to talk about gaming and the coronavirus. I'm going to answer any questions that you can fire at our social media staff. They will filter them to me via this screen, and I'll be able to answer them in real time. Hopefully give you some shout outs as well for throwing some questions in. And I can also answer anything else you're wondering about. I mean, our topic today is gaming and coronavirus. But if you've got a burning question, you don't know when you're going to be back on one of our Facebook Lives, just fire it in there. You can post your questions in the feed. We'll also post some links during the Facebook Live to helpful resources on childmind.org. And we'll also post details about the next Facebook Live. Remember, we are here, Child Mind Institute, every day at 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. for Facebook Lives. We look through your questions daily. That's one of the reasons I have at least 4 prepared questions before we start related to this topic. Just a little bit of background, while I am one of our clinical psychologists and my area of expertise is working with children, teens, and families who are perhaps experiencing ADHD or behavioral problems, anxiety, or mood issues, I get a lot of gaming questions because I'm one of our most frequent lecturers on screen time, gaming, and balance for kids. We also put out our most recent children's mental health report as of this past fall about screens and their effects on children. You can also find our children's mental health report on childmind.org. In terms of my gaming history, look, I'm a kid of the 80s and early 90s. I originally owned a Sega Genesis and a Game Boy. Was big into Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat on sleepovers, but at home, less of the fighting games, more of like Sonic the Hedgehog and RBI baseball. I got real into the baseball games, really liked the base stealers and tried to form super teams of just classic players with high speed. Today, because I have 2 kids under 4 at home, I don't have a lot of time for gaming. So most of my gaming experience comes from answering questions from families, the knowledge that teenagers might bring me about their gaming habits, and then also following up from my sessions and watching Twitch streamers play games that I've heard mentioned. But, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I can start off just with a few general points with gaming while we're waiting for some of the questions to roll in. In general, for any parents who might be watching this Facebook Live, there are some pre-COVID talking points that we have about gaming, which in general are just that we talk to parents about the fact that gaming itself in small doses has not been shown to be harmful, in the sense that especially screen time in general, being used in small doses during a certain portion of a kid's free time can be relaxing. In today's online world, it can be a way of connecting with friends. There are positives in the sense that kids say they find online communities or they're able to connect with their friends outside of school. At the same time, parents often come into this in seeing kind of things they might be concerned about games, like perhaps a level of violence or conflict in a game, or they might be concerned about things that might be happening in chat functions or while the kids are playing, because frequently games are competitive, and so kids might start trash talking, and that might be something disturbing if a parent is hearing a kid yell that or seeing some of the chat. At the same time, when we talk about gaming, we often talk to parents about being their kid's digital neighbor. So in that sense, if you're concerned about a game your child is playing, what we ask parents to do is sit down next to your child, watch them play the game. And here's the key. You have to really monitor your speech. You try not to criticize the game. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what you do all day. Not a great statement. Usually leads to the teenager trying to get you out of the room at that point. You try to avoid criticism. You try to avoid directions or reminding them of the next thing they have to do. Like, hey, listen, I want to remind you got 5 more minutes of this, and then you got to wash the dishes. You promised me. That kind of stuff usually makes it so that the kid doesn't feel supported in gaming. So you're trying to avoid criticism. You're trying to avoid giving them directions. You're also trying to avoid a ton of questions. Like, you can ask one question and see if they answer. But if they don't, it might be because they're in the middle of the game, and maybe they can answer your question later. If you pepper a kid with questions, most often, you get some annoyance or disrespect, which then causes parents to think they've got to intervene or shut down the game. So you try to avoid questions, directions, or criticism. And what you just do, describe what you're seeing on the screen that you think your kid is doing well from time to time, like, kind of infrequently. And then if they say anything to you, kind of reflect it. Oh, so you're telling me you guys are on a quest and you're actually trying to find this thing. Oh, okay, thanks for letting me know what you were doing. Oh, it looks like you guys really did well at battling that particular monster or enemy, that kind of stuff. Kids will say that you're kind of green and, your language isn't exactly right for the game. But those statements describing what's going on the screen or reflecting what they're saying show genuine interest, make it less likely you're going to be rejected, and make it more likely your kid's going to invite you to kind of see what they're doing and invite you into their world. The last thing I'll say about gaming is that it becomes that much less concerning if you play it. So, try it out. Now, kids always love playing with adults who are noobs in gaming just because they can beat them so soundly, and it proves their superiority in an arena where they don't normally feel like they're superior or they have power. So that's really fun for kids. And in the meantime, you can always also, especially during COVID, go back to classic games that you've played, Mario Kart, Sonic the Hedgehog, and show your kid who's boss. Now, I'm going to transition now to the first question that we collected prior to this Facebook Live. And it relates to a game that's very much of the moment. So this question is about Fortnite. So let me get past my thing. My son loves Fortnite. We used to be great about limiting his time on it, despite his many protests. But since we both started working from home, that's all gone out the window. I worry that our carefully set limits will be impossible to bring back once this is all over. What can we do to make sure we haven't totally blown it? So look, the interesting thing about this question. So first I'm going to start with Fortnite. If you decide to let your child play Fortnite, some parents are concerned for one reason or another about some of the content of Fortnite. Even though it's cartoonish, it still is, somewhat violent. And at the same time, there are other elements of Fortnite in the sense that you're trying to do a number of different things. Like there's a hide and seek function to the game. There's also a number of executive functioning things you have to think about in Fortnite, about like kind of when the environment might be closing in on you and where you should be positioned. And there's also a protective function of the game where it's not all aggressive. It's that you're trying to kind of shelter yourself from other players. So in that sense, Fortnite has a number of things going on. And I think that a lot of parents realize those deeper levels as they watch it. So in this question, the premise suggests that the parent is okay with Fortnite. It's just they want to limit the amount of time. And the question seems to be, but how easy will it be to snap back to our original limits if we've just blown it during coronavirus? So here's what we're telling parents, very simply. First, this is COVID. Get through it however you can. Accept the fact that we're all dealing with uncertainty and no structure, and try to put in what structure you can, realizing that when real life comes back, even the kids who've been gaming, during this time for a number of hours a day are going to be excited about returning to things. I have an adolescent patient who said to me last week, we have worked together for 4 years. He hates school, hates it. Even though he has great teachers that he acknowledges his teachers are real nice and they try to support him. He has, a school that is quite nice that he gets to go to, in a nice building, and he hates it. But he said to me last week, I cannot wait to go back to school. Seeing the smiling faces of even the history teacher that I don't even like that much will be a welcome, thing. So he's looking back to it. So one of the things we're telling parents about the snapback is first, when kids get the structure back in their schedule, when their extracurriculars come back, when their school comes back, they're going to be left with much less free time anyway than they are during COVID. So the reality is the structure will just be completely different. So this is a place where we're trying to get parents to forgive themselves if they're relaxing their boundaries around screen time, because inevitably the world will help you when COVID is over to reimpose some of that structure, reduce the amount of free time your kid might have to spend on screens. But during COVID, one of the things we're hearing from a lot of parents is that kids are spending a lot less time in online schooling than they were during the school day, in the sense that even if online schooling is supposed to be blocked out from 9 to 3, kids might have 2 hours of class or lecture they've got to watch, 2 hours of homework, and they're done. And you're left with the whole rest of the day, and you can only take so many walks while social distancing. And so what we tell parents is go back to basic wellness practices and the balance at this time. Make sure your kid's sleeping and it's turning off screens an hour before bedtime. Make sure that you're having some quality family time a couple times a week. Try to make meals or other things, no screen times. and make sure that your kid's getting some exercise. And beyond that, if you decide to allow them a larger portion of their screen time on screens, in particular with Fortnite isn't even playing alone. Most of the time you're playing with friends. And this is a way of kind of killing two birds with one stone, in that a kid gets social connection and they get amusement. And I think what a lot of parents are doing is, as they're relaxing these boundaries, they're also making the relaxation of the boundaries a little bit contingent on behavior. Like, we'd like you to at least speak respectfully during our family time to us in order to have this extra fortnight. Or we'd like to make sure that you stay calm while we check your homework, before you get on Fortnite. And that can be a way of making sure that you at least get some of the things you're looking for from your child in exchange for just the relaxation of boundaries. It just doesn't happen, kind of on a whim. So I want to check in with our media people here about whether or not, we got one. Ashley, thank you for firing a question in right here. My son has been diagnosed with ADHD. Oh, Travis, can we flash up one more time? So sorry. My son, who's been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, Ashley, thank you for this, because I formerly ran the ADHD and Behavior Disorders Center at the Child Mind Institute. So this is a question right up my alley. So you're saying that he's become very compulsive during this lockdown, and that you find it worrying. Now, I'm going to interpret this question a couple of different ways, because compulsive can mean a number of different things. In the sense that kids with ADHD, one of the real difficulties with the symptoms is that when things are boring or repetitive, or when they're not, that interesting or engaging, kids with ADHD run to the things that are more engaging, less boring, and have kind of more variety and novelty to them, which tend to be devices. In houses right now, the boundary between those devices and school or other boring things has evaporated. It's fluid, in the sense that kids could go to school and at least know that within those walls, phones weren't welcome, iPads weren't welcome, the Xbox was not around the corner from their work area. So the reality is that, what you might see is that, as a way of both dealing with stress and getting control over the level of uncertainty during this time, and because some of these resources are so accessible, you've got kids who, otherwise would have, a lot of difficulty kind of sustaining their effort on things that are boring, really pushing their parents to allow them, a lot of time on games, or a sort of ritual around games. Like, if they've gotten it one day, they want it the next day over and over. They'll remind you, like, listen, I got gaming before I had lunch. I got gaming before I did my homework. I got gaming right after my homework, and you didn't bother me until bedtime. And they'll act like they've got to have that. And some parents will also interpret as kind of compulsiveness the idea that a kid might become really emotionally dysregulated when they come off gaming. Like, oh my God, they need it so much. It looks like a drug to them, because they're mad that they had to end, a game early, or that you kind of stopped it. Again, what we go back to with parents is we try to settle the system here. We say, look, only 3 weeks ago, your kid may have been abiding by your boundaries around gaming, or there may have been structures in society that helped you with setting boundaries. And what we want to think about at this stage is, we want to think with parents. So we do this kind of off the ball when you're not talking to the kid. And we say, look, what do you need your child to get done? How can we make that clear? And with kids with ADHD, it's really important not to say this orally, but to write it down. How can we make it clear in writing? Here are the things I need you to do. Here are the times of day when I'm willing to allow you to be on screens or to game. And here's the way that you earn certain of that time. Like, for a lot of parents, we're setting up systems right now where some gaming time is just allowed as kind of a break, and some gaming time is really contingent on whether the child shows you those behaviors. And the difficult part, I think, right now is that once you set up a system like that, where you say, here are the times I'm okay with it, here's the ways you can earn your kind of bonus game time, and here are the behaviors I need, lots of kids push against that system for one reason or another. They'll be moody for the first few days of it. They'll ask you 1,000 times. They'll get real angry. They'll slam some doors. They'll go into their room. That's what we call an extinction burst. It's that for many humans, when boundaries are set, their first reaction is to push against those boundaries with everything they've got, just to make sure they're firm. And then eventually the extinction burst fades. So I want to remind parents out there that if you need to kind of snap back some boundaries right now around screens, you're likely to see an uptick in some irritability in your kids for a couple days. If you can push through that and just tolerate that irritability, or if it gets really terrible, you can give some consequences, it's very likely it'll settle out and people will settle into their new normal in terms of habits and what you're willing to offer. But it's tough to hold that line because kids, they're not doing this consciously, but they are programmed to push against some of that stuff just to see if you really mean it. So I'm going to pause for a second. Maverick asks, I like this, Top Gun. How do we put screen time limits in a kind way? Yeah. So Maverick, I think this question relates to what I was just hitting on the end of Ashley's question here. But it's basically that, with screen time limits in a nice way, one of the things that I think about that helps to kind of like cushion screen time limits right now is one of the points I referred to earlier in this Facebook Live, which is playing the games with your kids or being on screens with your kids. It's that you've got kind of time when the two of you might be on screens together, you and your child. If it's watching a movie, watching a show, playing a game, whatever it might be, it shows that you don't think screens are evil and you think it might be a tool for some sort of bonding during this. And then in terms of setting nice limits, going back to the answer I was just giving Ashley, you can say to your kids, look, I know you need a break. I know you need to relax. At some level, I want to be able to give you that time during any given day. So this portion of your screen time is just going to be your break to do what you would like with, obviously within certain boundaries, depending on what you want to set limits on. And then the thing is, there could be another set or kind of any screen time over what you feel is kind of a reasonable amount in any given day they might earn as bonus, could be contingent on behavior. So what the kid sees is really just worldview. It's that you want to enjoy screens with them. You got a certain amount of time that they just need as a break, or maybe they need screen time to connect with their friends because that's the only way they can do it right now. And you're just going to kind of allow them that. And then at the same time, you're going to have some screen time that's contingent on you seeing the kind of stuff you need to see to keep things copacetic in your family right now. And that's often takes the space of, or takes the form of some sort of written contract. We have information on forming contracts with your kids on childmind.org. Another partner of ours, Common Sense Media, also has information about screen time contracts. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics also has a website, I believe it's healthychildren.org, that has information on forming these kinds of contracts with kids around screen time. So, do we have another question we want to fire? All right, so I'm going to a question that we've got on our sheet here. So next, we're very strict about gaming limits in our house, but right now it seems like my daughter's only social interaction is through online games. Should we relax our standards? And this is a great question we collected before this because the reality here with gaming limits is that we can adapt to any parent's gaming limits. So we want to remind parents that if you are setting strict limits, that is perfectly fine. We're one of the things we emphasize to parents is that while gaming itself in small doses may not be harmful, there are points to consider related to adolescent sleep. There are points to consider related to young children who should not be exposed to screens in large quantities because it's pushing out other really important developmental tasks they need to focus on in critical periods. And then similarly for kids with mental health and learning disorders, a lot of screen time can be risky in terms of exacerbating ADHD symptoms or mood disorder symptoms. So, if parents are setting strict limits, we want to ally with them and figure out how we can kind of support this. But I like the question here because it's this question of we're setting strict limits in the pre-COVID age. And what we know is that our daughter's getting social interaction face-to-face, probably at school or on play dates or on the weekend if she goes to a movie with a friend or something like that. But right now, our only option is screens. So, what you got to think about is what your boundaries were related to friend time during the week, before, say, COVID. And that may be what you map onto her screen time now. So we're working with lots of parents who will say, look, how often did your daughter have contact with her friends during the week? Well, she could contact them a lot during the school day and have kind of these brief conversations throughout, maybe showing out with them a little bit at the end of the school day. Didn't usually have play dates or get-togethers, during the week. A lot of that time was homework. And then on the weekend, they might have like an activity you do together. And so we'll say to the parent, let's try to make digital life look at least somewhat like that. Let's give her an opportunity to connect for a brief time with some friends, each day, just to talk through like what's going on with school or what they're up to or something like that, or to connect with them while, maybe playing a game of some kind. And then on the weekend, let's try to think through events. Like, are the kids going to all put their screens in the kitchen and they're going to bake together? Or are they all going to play a game together? Or, are they just going to have a big group conversation about kind of what's going on? Whatever it is, we want to kind of support kids to still have some of that level of social interaction, but within kind of what is reasonable. in the sense that if a kid says, no, I want to be on FaceTime the entire time I'm in school or doing homework and on chat all night, obviously that's not healthy for the kid. It's going to take away from sleep. We're not really multitaskers as much as we believe ourselves to be, so they won't focus on their school or their homework as much. So we still need to set those limits, even though we feel bad for our kids that they're not getting social interaction or they might feel left out. But we still try to kind of work with them to figure out when can you connect with your friends in something that resembles, your pre-COVID social interactions. So right now I'm gonna move to, just our last couple prepared questions. One question we got, I think I've already addressed a couple points on this. It's very simple. Can I just let my kid play as much as he wants? We're all pretty tired. and look, this is what it goes back to for us as therapists. That what we try to do is ally with whatever someone's reality might be. So if a parent says to us right now, I am exhausted, I just want somebody to release me from the guilt of just letting my kid play as much as they want for a little while. And we say, look, if that's what's going to help you get back on track, like first and foremost, what's most important during COVID is that everybody stays kind of sane and they tend to their mental health and they get the breaks they need, or they kind of, figure out how to manage and balance their life in even small ways. So if relaxing your screen boundaries for a short time, just let your kid play, will give you a chance to, cook some food or do a little bit of exercise or read that thing you've been needing to read for work. We're trying to get parents to be compassionate with themselves, to tell themselves you can be, you can forgive yourself for the fact that you're relaxing your boundaries a little bit and it's okay. The thing that we keep telling parents during this time, at least as we meet with them in sessions, is if you can give yourself a B- at the end of the day with a few meltdowns with your kids and, everybody's fed and generally has slept, you're doing pretty well. So in that sense, if a parent is worried that letting a kid play as much as they want on one day will lead to this becoming the pattern, we'll help them to figure out how to snap that back with many of the recommendations we've talked about in this Facebook Live. But if you need it for a little while, please take the breaks you need. Try to keep it so that you and your kid can interact in a relationship building way rather than one where everybody's kind of annoyed and snapping at each other. Last thing I'll throw out there, we had a question which is how young is too young to introduce kids to gaming? Is it bad for younger children to play video games? So I'll go back here because I think this is a pertinent question. When we look at kind of the gaming world, lots of kids start asking their parents to be involved in games in kind of middle to late elementary school. And the games, parents really need to monitor the content during those times, monitor the chat functions, because it could be that lots of older players are playing on these games. Really think about, what is age appropriate for their kids. And also, for most young kids, if they're going to game, it's going to be in very short bursts. They're going to be focused on the game for 30 to 45 minutes, perhaps. But it's something where we tell parents, introduce kids to gaming in kind of late elementary school if they're looking to do that, by sitting next to them and doing it with them. Like that's the best way to teach them the kind of online behavior you'd like to see, to know what they're playing, to know what content they're being exposed to, and to know what features you might need to set security around, for your young kid. To be sure, and this is going along with the American Academy of Pediatrics, kids younger than, that kind of late elementary school age, we need to be cautious about, partly because there just are so many important developmental tasks that happen face-to-face related to language development and motor development and social skills development that really, while screens may not injure that particular development, they don't help. And so in that sense, we still want to think about, at least during this time with COVID, about what face-to-face interactions can promote those really important skills for young children. How can we get them exercise? How can we get them practicing their gross and fine motor skills? How can we make sure they're practicing conversation and taking turns and social skills with others? And that involves spending family time together. But again, as we talked about before, if parents feel like they need to relax their screen boundaries just to be able to balance work and life or other responsibilities at this moment, please be kind to yourselves. Engage in some level of self-compassion and accept the fact there are just some things about COVID that we cannot necessarily control, but can get our lives to some degree back to normal after this. So look, I want to thank you all for joining me. I hope this Facebook Live was helpful. Remember, we are here every day at 10 a.m. and we'll be here again this afternoon at 4:30. We look through your questions daily. Check the post for the topics for our next few Facebook Lives. And lastly, the Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. We have resources on our website, daily tips. We have telehealth consultations, gold standard telehealth treatments. We also are doing research in the area of coronavirus and collecting data on people's experiences right now so we can be better prepared to serve people in crises in the future. Please visit childmind.org/coronavirus. Be safe, and thanks for listening.